Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's South Carolina Writers Workshop webinar featuring Holly McClure and possibly Aurelia Sands, who may be joining us later. I'm Trilby Plants. I'm past president of SCWW, and I'll be the moderator for today. Holly McClure is an author and former literary agent. Holly, would you like to add anything to that?
I would add that I've been writing since I was a child and don't expect to ever stop because there's still so much to learn and so much growing to do. And there are few careers we could have that allow for more growth than being a writer, because you constantly have to learn your craft and keep updating and keep up with the whole business of writing and what's expected of us. So I'm now working very hard at writing and promoting my books, just like the rest of you.
Great. And I just heard from Aurelia. She is trying to get on, so she should be here soon.
Okay.
We'll see what happens. I only see one viewer on my information.
I see Valerie.
Okay, hang on, she's calling me.
Okay.
I can edit this out at the end. Hi, Aurelia. Oh, hi, Wanda. I can't talk right now. Can I send you another link? Okay. Yep. Got an attendee who can't get on. Okay. Okay, I see 2 viewers. I really hate to start until we get more people.
I'm wondering if they just haven't got the knack of it.
Really wants to know if it's Eastern Standard Time.
I think it is, isn't it?
Oh, and I misspelled now. It says Mo. Oh, thank you. Spell check.
We won't edit it.
I can always edit this down after the fact. I just feel bad if there are people actually watching our live feed.
Right.
I once tuned in for the edification of all. I once tuned into a webinar a couple of months ago, and one of them was in the US and one in the UK, and the one in the UK could not get anything right. So the one in the US carried for about 20 minutes, and the other one finally got on.
I see somebody showed up.
There we go. Okay, can she hear us? It's Aurelia. There she is. Hi.
Hello, Aurelia. How are you?
Sorry, I was thinking Central Time. I'm on Central Time.
I'm so sorry. Didn't dawn on me.
We're all on our time. Right?
At any rate, I was doing the introductions, and I did introduce Holly.
I had an hour still.
So I'll introduce you. Aurelia Sands is a publisher with Deerhawk Publications, and would you like to add anything else? Okay. I lost your audio. There you are.
Second.
Don't have audio for you, Aurelia. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay. So your video may not be great, but your audio is working. Okay. Welcome to our viewers. And I'm going to use what you said on your comment on Facebook, Aurelia. A Slush Fest is an interactive workshop where our presenters will comment on your manuscripts. They'll mention what catches their attention, what doesn't, and why. And it's a great way to pick their brains and help hone your craft. Couple of housekeeping things. If we lose this feed, stay tuned and log in again in a minute or two. If my internet goes out, which it sometimes does, I have to start it again. It's takes a minute or so. You can ask questions using the chat or the question feature. If you move your cursor over to the left side of your screen, it should appear. Does anybody have any questions? And sometimes I don't see the questions for some reason. Okay. I don't see any. Okay, let's get started. If the people who submitted the manuscripts aren't here, I will notify them that they can watch this after the fact because it's being broadcast on our YouTube channel. Excuse me. I'm just going to start with the first one I have in my stack. It's called Shattered Glass. Do you want me to read the pitch at the top first before I start?
Yeah, that'd be fine, I think.
Okay.
Let's go for it.
Okay. And I don't know how to get both of you live at the same time.
I'm at the corner in the bottom, so I'm happy there.
Okay. Shattered Glass, YA fiction. A teenage summer nanny tries to shield children from their parents' alcohol abuse and violence, while sad secrets tear her own family apart. I stepped out of the narrow metal shower and felt the floor give a little beneath my feet. The vinyl floor's brown and gold swirls had probably been far out and groovy in the 1970s. Now, in 2015, it just seems sad. The shabby cottage held rump-sprung, beat-up furniture, owl statues, and mushroom figurines. Owls had made a comeback recently, not sure why, but mushrooms? Wasn't that a 70s thing? Psychedelic mushrooms? You want me to pause and you can make comments, or should I just keep going?
I would comment that she could do without the had been and any of the passive language, and maybe keep it going forward rather than comment on what had happened back in the 60s or whatever, because that kind of slows down the movement forward rather than, you really don't want to go backward. You can comment on she stepped out on the floor that was, the old style floor or something like that, and keep her moving and keep the story going forward rather than going back in time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely agree. The first thing that you always want to do at the beginning of a story is just basically drop the person right in.
Right.
Okay, I'll read a little bit more. I will never understand the olden days. The stiff bath towel served as a pumice stone, too. I threw on shorts and a top and rubbed steam from a corner of the medicine cabinet mirror so I could watch myself run a comb through my long, dark blonde hair. Pretty much the extent of my summer beauty routine. I'd woken up earlier than my two little summer charges, 4-year-old Beth and 6-year-old Jeffrey, but I needed to move it to stay ahead. They had me outnumbered. As I headed for the small bedroom, the kid's dad roared from the kitchen, "Emily, get in here." My heart sped up. I detoured to the kitchen, only a few steps away. What the hell happened? He faced me with hunched shoulders and fisted hands. The kids faced their father, wide-eyed with fear. The table showed a crude attempt at breakfast. Cereal and milk spilled on the table, chairs, and floor. Both kids hurried over to me, their heads bowed. His broad face red with anger, Mr. Locke said, "Where were you? Not here 24 hours and already the damn place is trashed." I wondered how much of a mess my heart would add when it exploded. "They weren't up when I got in the shower. I'm sorry." Beth burst into noisy tears and buried her face in my hip. Jeffrey's expression altered from frightened to fierce. I could almost feel energy crackling from his body like loose electricity.
I think she's got a good story going on, but I would go back again. Instead of that, I will never understand the olden days. You don't need that.
That takes you completely out of the story, I agree, because she went from past tense to present tense right in that moment, and you're ending up with being taken right out of the story.
Exactly, and the same thing when I had woken up, or you're going back, you can continue talking about getting up before the children without that past tense thing.
She does a good job of showing instead of telling, which is one of the things that's really difficult to do. First person is a difficult genre, a difficult point of view to start off with. So staying in one tense and staying out of other people's heads is going to be a real difficulty in this particular story.
Right. But she seems to be getting that for the most part. But it is going to be, Aurelia's right, it is a difficult point of view to work with, because you have to stay with that one person. If she can't see it, if it's not happening in her world, then it can't be happening. So that's going to limit her with what can happen around her in the story.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next one. It's a fantasy adventure. Everything is so totally different. Fantasy adventure on the way to Alice. Just because you are delusional doesn't mean you can't really be a flying alien in the Australian outback, intent on freeing your Aborigine relatives. Number 132. If this plane crashes, I'm really going to be pissed. Malcolm Ironwater tapped the period onto the end of the numbered entry in his journal, then flipped it closed and slid his pen back into his shirt pocket. The pen tapped against the little bottle of antipsychotic pills resting near his heart, and he patted the bottle affectionately. After several failed attempts to sail to Australia aboard tramp steamers that kept putting him off at remote islands, he was finally on his way to the Red Center to set his people free. He was not actually physiologically an Aborigine, but he knew in his heart that he was one of them, and he also knew that even though they did not know him yet, their souls cried out for him to save them. He snatched up his pen again and clicked the tip down. I'll pause right there.
Okay.
First of all, I love the pitch on this one. I'm not a huge fan of using you in any type of narrative, but the pitch on this one instantly has me going, okay, what's happening next?
True, I like that, and I like that you brought up that he had antipsychotic meds. She didn't have to say, he's mentally ill or anything. She just points to that, and that tells the whole story. So I think that was a good way to do it. And it's moving pretty well.
Agreed.
Okay, I'll continue. Number 133. I am not a, pardon this, I can't pronounce this word, Malacroce Indian. He knew he was an Aborigine, just as he knew that he wasn't really Malacroce Indian, the name that had come to him in a drug-induced episode. The tribe he used to think he led, and had described to all the friendly people who worked at the sanitarium. When he looked into the polished stainless steel mirror in his room, they weren't allowed glass ones, He just saw the same plump Caucasian face that had always stared back at him, maybe with a hint of the Indian his father always told him was part of his ancestry. No, he knew he wasn't Malakroshi Indian. He really knew that now, and he didn't think that anymore. He was pretty sure that he didn't. Number 134. Convincing the swell people at the sanitarium that I am not Malakroshi Indian is why the kindly nurses, doctors, and therapists signed the papers to let me go home again. It was a good thing not to tell them that I'm Aborigine now, and I am sorry I lied about that to Odie. The therapist had sent him off with the little blue and white striped happy white people pills he was supposed to be taking but didn't.
I'm kind of getting lost with, is he keeping a journal? Is he going back and forth? It sounds like he's doing two things at once. Am I missing something?
No, that's exactly what he's doing on a piece of paper. That last sentence is really garbled too. I understand what he was what the narrative was trying to say, but it needs to have been said in a different way to make the story flow better.
And then he didn't need to repeat the same thing. What about 4 times? I'm not Malakroshi Indian. So he could say that one time and it's said. So I don't think we need to keep repeating it.
Absolutely.
Okay? Great. Okay, we will go on to historical fiction, a fictional biography. In a male-dominated 12th century France, Adele of Blois survives complicated and dangerous conflicts to become a powerful influence in her world. And the subtitle is Abbey of Marcigny, France, January 1136. 1136. A small figure clad in black defied the good intentions and well-meaning concerns of her companions and sat alone on a bench in the middle of the abbey's garden. The other nuns fretted that her cloak was too thin, the bench too hard and cold, the sun too weak, and the breeze too strong. Speaking firmly, Adele, the prioress of Marcigny, reassured them that she would be warm enough on this mild January afternoon and sent them away. While she might be 2 years away from completing the 7th decade of her life, she was more than capable of being by herself for an hour or so. Reluctantly, they left her, but Adele suspected they were out of sight, but not out of earshot.
I think this has promise. There's I think she kind of slipped into the point of view of the other nuns at one point. She could easily fix that by she listened to them say or something, so it stays in her head rather than getting into what they think.
It's also, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Linda.
It's also telling instead of showing. You could show so much of Adele's personality right here just by having that as a conversation instead of telling us that she had this conversation with the nuns.
Absolutely, that's a very good point.
Okay, I'll go on. Adele could hear the rustle of the few remaining autumn leaves still in the garden as they tumbled in the light breeze. The air was crisp, but the sun's rays gave a promise for the coming of spring. She relished the warmth of the sun on her face. It was not enough to keep her warm. That task was for the heavy fur-lined woolen cloak engulfing her. When she looked up, she could see smoke from the abbey's bakehouse heading up to the heavens as the scent of fresh bread filled the air. Only the scrolls clutched in her hands turned this normal day at Marcigny into an extraordinary one. The first letter from Abbot Peter of Cluny arrived just as the nuns were just starting their meal for the day. Before the meal was finished, the envoy from England appeared with another letter for her. Adele's sisters in the service to the Lord were eager to have her read the messages immediately, so they could also know the news. However, Adele preferred to wait until she could be alone. Thus, after the meal, when most of the nuns were busy, she headed towards the garden.
Just flip tenses. It sounds like she went back to when the mail first came, and then she's not in the garden anymore. So I kind of got lost there. I think she needed to stick in one place. Either start it when it arrived at breakfast, or stay in the garden and think about it, or discuss it with someone else, or whatever. So it's like,
Absolutely.
but I think that would improve a lot if you just. Usually people start in the wrong place, and that's why they have to go back and do something. If you start where things really change, which it sounds like when the girls first arrived, or the community first arrived, that's when it actually starts, which is a little bit more exciting than just sitting in the garden. And then a lot of details about where the weather was. It's kind of a cliche when you begin with this weather report that does nothing but slow it down. You need like one sentence saying, she stepped out into the cold November wind or whatever. And that tells us all we need to know about the weather. And if she could just start it where something actually happened.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of action in this page, and without the action, people are just going to stop reading it.
Exactly.
On top of that, one of the first things that popped out at me was she was talking about a fur-lined cloak.
Right.
With the whole verification, I'm always looking at things like, would they actually have a fur-lined cloak? If you're an abbess in 12th century monastery, you're not going to. Or a 12th century abbey, you're not going to have a fur-lined cloak, because fur-lined cloaks indicate wealth, or indicate money being spent. If you take a vow of poverty, you're not going to have that. And it might seem nitpicky to say that, but at the same time, if you don't have your details correct, you're not going to have that reasonable suspension of disbelief that your audience really needs.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. I think the biggest thing, and you brought this up, is the show don't tell. There's an awful lot of just telling. And she needs to get into going it and let us see what's happening rather than hearing her tell it.
That would show a much stronger personality. And she's also, it seems like instead of being in just one point of view, she's trying to be third person omniscient. And I can tell you that doesn't really work for 99% of the stories that I've read that people have tried to do that. Instead of being in the other sisters' heads, she could actually show them being anxious, or side eyes, or something that shows that they're anxious instead. That goes back to the whole show don't tell.
Exactly.
Okay, next one, called The Sweet Peas, women's fiction. 6 Southern black sisters chase answers to uncovered secrets and discover family is thicker than blood. Ruby, the youngest Nesbit sister, wiped her brow in the merciless South Carolina heat. She scooped up another handful of coconut coir, it's C-O-I-R, and added it to the marijuana plants to hold moisture sufficiently to the plant roots. Sweat came rolling back down her face, stinging her cerulean eyes. Ruby would normally leave for a glass of sweet tea, Southern champagne, but time wouldn't allow it. The work had to go on. The marijuana crop in the corner of the barn would have to be gleaned soon. She prayed this harvest would come off without a hitch.
There's a lot that I could say about this particular one. I mean, she does start with some action. At the same time, this is supposed to be an African American lady, and she's got blue eyes. That's a little bit unusual. Um, the pitch itself, I was not terribly thrilled with. Um, it has all of these things. They have a sudden mystery or secrets, but uncovered secrets means that it's if unless it was recently uncovered, they wouldn't be secrets anymore. And the family is thicker than blood is it's just confusing.
Exactly. And there's still a lot of showing and not, I mean, telling and not showing too. That's going to be a problem. And
Absolutely.
she's slipping into things that really don't move the story along, like the talk about iced tea. She didn't have it, so why are we talking about it if she didn't have it? That's just throwing in something that actually didn't happen. So I think she could lose that and just keep the story moving a little bit more quickly. A lot of wiping sweat, that's kind of a cliche. That's just another way of saying it's hot. And, you know, it's good to do that without saying it's hot. But I think there are better ways to do it. Just move on. You know, what time of the year is it and whatever. But it kind of gets into a cliche when you start talking about how hot it is and wiping the sweat and eating iced tea. So that's just a little bit too much Southern and not enough movement, not enough story. So keep moving with the story. Introduce us to her and what is she doing with growing pot? And you know, this sounds like a really interesting story, but if you don't let us see the person and watch it happening, it's hard to get hooked on it. You have to get hooked on her. And also, when you mentioned the number of sisters, who is the protagonist here? Is she gonna carry it? So I'd like to know a little bit more about that. I don't like it when I get hooked on a character and then suddenly it's somebody else. So this kind of makes me suspect that might happen when you've got that many people. So I'd like to be more secure in who the protagonist is that I'm going to be reading about.
Agreed.
Okay, I'll go on. Thoughts were swirling in Ruby's head like leaves in a windstorm. Patience, her sister living in Washington, D.C., would probably be home for Judge Holcomb's funeral. Her last visit home found Julia among another of the 6 sisters in jail and the farm being searched by the feds. Ruby wanted the bickering among her sisters to cease. She wiped her brow again and looked over at the seedlings left to plant. 3 more. She could make that. Finally, with the last one potted, watered, nourished, and nurtured, she rolled up the hems of her jeans and headed to the pond to soak her tortured feet. Sitting on the bank, she removed her boots and socks and gingerly dipped her feet in and out of the water. Leaning back on her arms, she could feel the stiffness in her back after a long day of planting. Ruby looked up at the sky that refused to rain. As she glanced down, she caught sight of the dying vines along a short fence where Mamie's flowers once bloomed. Her painted ladies, her girls, Mamie used to call them. Somehow, Ruby knew Mamie's sweet peas would never be the same. Withered petals like chipped paint fell to the ground and scampered off in all directions. Ruby, where are you, girl? Supper's almost ready. Be there directly, Gertie, Ruby called out to her sister. Just taking a moment to soak my feet. Okay, darling, supper'll hold for you, Gertie said from the kitchen window.
I think she's going to have to make this a little bit more interesting, and she can do that by, again, you start in the wrong place, it's going to be boring. You're going to have to go back. She mentioned the last time they were home and one ended up in jail, and she wanted the bickering to cease. That sounds like a lot more exciting than just wiping her forehead and soaking her feet and wishing for tea or whatever, because nothing has actually happened. It's you've got to have more life in it to get somebody to read it, because you read her it's going to just listen to all these little asides and everything and not get hooked in at all. You need to start where something big happened, like the last time they were home and one ended up in jail. That sounds more interesting than the foot soaking and whatever else is going on. I just think you need to start in a different place so it doesn't tend to drag.
There's a lot more telling and not showing as well. Plus, in a story, when you're on the first page, it should give you a really good idea of what time it is, what time period, everything like that. And you've got a general idea, but you don't have a good idea. This could be anywhere from 1970 on up, and there's already some issues that I would have with the story. At the beginning, she's growing marijuana plants. Okay, and last time that one of the sisters was home, the feds were on the place already. Well, would she be really growing marijuana plants after the feds were already there once? There's a lot going on here that it doesn't bring me in, and it doesn't show me that, yeah, I could totally believe that this would be going on after all of this other stuff had happened too.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I have a question from one of the viewers wondering if if the other people watching have copies of the manuscripts. And no. And I lost one of the questions, so if that person would please resend it. Okay, anything else?
That's it. Just get the story moving more quickly and start it where some action happens.
Okay. Okay, next one. A romantic suspense, double danger. An ordinary kindergarten teacher, haunted by her fear of firearms, reluctantly falls for a man who carries a gun. She faces a fateful choice: shoot him to save them both or die. Chapter 1, Escanaba, Michigan. Something was wrong, very wrong. Travis Nichols knew it the moment he stepped into the mudroom of his house. Darkness and warm, stale air greeted him. His wife, Caroline, always left a kitchen light on, it must be, and liked to sleep in a cold environment, snuggled under a down blanket even on a warm summer night like this. The AC wasn't running. The kitchen was dark. The only light, the digital display on the stove, 137. He towed off his wet shoes and crept to the kitchen door, his senses alert. He squeezed his eyes shut for a few seconds and then opened them to help his vision adjust to the darkness. Better. The only sound was a faint drip on the tile floor of rainwater off his jacket.
I like the pitch to start off with, and then it does put you right into the action. However, it is a bit redundant there at the beginning.
Well, my question would be, so she says it's about a kindergarten teacher, and then it starts out with this man. Is he a kindergarten teacher? I need to know who the protagonist is going to be. And if it's going to be a female kindergarten teacher, then start with her. And you've started with somebody else, and I wasn't sure why. I really like to start out with whoever it is I'm supposed to attach to, who's going to be the one that guides me through the story. And if it's not the protagonist, then I just kind of don't trust it. I'd rather she starts with the person that we're going to be reading about. And if this is who it is, if this guy is the main character, it's an interesting thing and it sounds exciting, but she needs to change her pitch to a man who finds out his wife is hurt or whatever. Let us know that if he's going to be the main character.
Very true.
Okay. Rainwater off his jacket. His weapon was in the backpack he held. Something told him not to risk the sound of a zipper. He eased the backpack and his computer case onto the floor. Silence engulfed him. His stockinged feet made no sound as he crossed the kitchen and leaned against the wall beside the doorway. "Caro," he whispered. Silence. Maybe she had gone out with friends. Caroline had not answered his earlier phone call or text, so an evening with friends was possible. She had never liked being alone. He was supposed to be on a plane to Detroit and from there ostensibly to Berlin. In reality, he was headed to a classified location in Iran. But his flight was canceled after a series of heavy thunderstorms had rolled across the Upper Peninsula, spawning a tornado. It damaged a hangar and some houses in his neighborhood in the southern part of Escanaba along Little Bay de Noc. His street had been spared, only a few large branches down and no major damage. A rustling sound from the living room froze him against the wall, his senses hyper-alert. After a moment he decided it was just the creaks and groans of an old house, or the wind scratching a branch against an upstairs window. Relief washed over him. He made a mental note to call a tree service in the morning and have the red oak trimmed.
Again, starting with something that kind of gets you hooked in, that he's there in a tense situation. Then the next thing you know, he's off talking about the storm and somewhere, and he didn't go. So a lot of things that didn't happen are being talked about. So I would say continue and tell us what's going on without getting sidetracked into the past. Anytime you go back and fill in backstory, it really needs to be something that advances the story rather than takes you out of it. And the way this is done kind of takes you out of that story and puts you back, like the weather and the storm and why you didn't go and where you were supposed to go, and a lot of things that are not part of this really vivid scene that's taking place.
Absolutely. When they're talking about the storm and then talking about a tree, calling a tree service, you're sitting there going, if you're thinking something's wrong, would you really be thinking about calling a tree service?
Right. Takes the excitement out of it, makes it mundane.
Okay, thanks. Going on, adult fiction, Love and Kudzu. Four lovelorn North Georgians take a whack at finding love or reviving their love lives. Chapter 1. Big Dwayne Fitz seldom got near enough to an infant to smell baby soap. He inhaled, waggled his head, and made a gruff noise, instantly rewarded with a baby belly laugh. She grasped his large finger in a dimpled hand, and he lifted it closer to give the tiny fingers a kiss. Mouth and eyes wide, she chortled again.
Doesn't fit with the pitch. If they're looking for romance or whatever, revive their love life. I'm getting the picture that this guy is probably the main character and he wants a baby. And if that's the case, let's just keep moving forward and keep in that and find out how it's part of this narrative.
Yeah, the pitch doesn't match.
Right.
Okay. Tommy Gooding eased up behind Dwayne in the church doorway. Kissing a babe is tons more satisfying than kissing babies, Tommy said. The baby's grandmother shook her head, still smiling. Leave it to you to ruin a sweet moment, troublemaker. She headed down the sidewalk, carrying the baby into the chilly November evening. Dwayne caught the church door in a meaty hand and held it. You got experience at kissing babies? Hell no. Tommy gave Dwayne a hearty back slap. See ya, man. Things to do, places to go, babes to kiss. The last of the meeting goers passed through the open door. Dwayne peered down the stairwell to the basement of the First Baptist Church of Pine Water Falls, Georgia. Honey? He called. His wife, Doria, chairperson of the planned summer festival, marched up the stairs in her narrow flats. A loaded keychain hung from her wrist on a coil band, jangling with each sharp step. She swatted light switches, snatched the door from his grasp and flipped through keys, brisk even for her. "Something wrong?" Dwayne asked. She yanked on the handle to test the lock. What could possibly be wrong? His stomach hit an air pocket. What was today's date? "Cramps," Doria said. I started just before the meeting." Dwayne's heart labored like a small engine on an uphill climb. No baby. 8 years and still no baby. Every 4 weeks, Doria met the date with her usual brusque efficiency and a dose of Midol. Every time, the news gouged him like a butcher knife.
It's very slow. It sounds, what I'm picking up is that there's a couple that really wants to have a baby and can't. And that's something that you could have a lot more tension and emotion with. So again, showing and not telling, and that would help with this.
I do like the wording in this. Again, it doesn't fit with the pitch, but you do have some of the tension, but not nearly as much as you would think after 8 years of trying to have a kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
It's got promise if you can define exactly what it is and bring that pitch out a little bit better to make it really tell us how this is going on, because the pitch kind of confuses me when I listen to this. I keep wondering, how is that supposed to fit in?
Absolutely.
Okay. The next one and last one is popular fiction. Siblings separated in childhood are reunited as adults. One suffers from religious delusions during Lent, and he causes the death of the other. On the 10th day of Lent, and in the middle of his 10th day of fasting, Big Mike was sitting on the sofa trimming his toenails when he heard the voice of God. He left a cigarette burning in the ashtray, went to the bedroom, where he jammed a few pieces of clothing, along with his Bible, into a backpack. The back door slammed behind him as he began the trek to Tent City, a homeless camp set up at Jacob's Creek on the outside of town. The cold winter rain pelted him, but he felt invigorated and joyful as he goose-stepped down the roadside. He left behind his phone, his medications, and his wife.
Okay, this sounds kind of exciting. When you heard the voice of God, who knows where this is going? So I think there's a lot of potential here. And I need to see how it's going, how it's going to keep moving.
Yeah, there's some pretty good movement here at the beginning, and a lot of it has to do with the action verbs that are in it. You've got things like jamming pieces and slamming and pelting and just actual action verbs.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. Broken Bobby stood beneath a plastic tarp that served as the entrance to his campsite. He spotted Big Mike lumbering down the sloped pathway. He raised a hand in greeting. "Hey, Mike, you're back, eh? What happened? The old lady kick you out again?" Mike ducked under the blue tarp and clapped Bobby on the back. "I'm here because Father sent me." Bobby looked away and sucked his teeth as realization spread across his face. Big Mike was a frequent visitor and occasional occupant of Tent City. Bobby witnessed Mike's erratic behavior the last time he came to the camp. He knew it was best not to provoke Mike, but he was in no mood for that Jesus business on a day when he was so close to freezing. "I might have had some use for that one time, Mike, but now, brother, not now."
Lots of hopping.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just listening to the head hopping. We'll talk about that later.
Bobby gave up on religion during his time in federal prison. Tattoos hidden by his winter clothes bore testimony to new allegiances. Mike stepped around to look at Bobby. Uneven light filtered through the entrance. A single black tear seemed to slide down Bobby's face. What the? Mike looked closer and realized it was a tattoo. When did you get that? Don't you remember? Last summer, for Mom. No, you should have come and gotten me. I could have helped her. Bobby shook his head and flipped his cigarette into the rain.
He did go back and forth. He started out with one character, with Big Mike, and then the next thing you know, we're seeing through Bobby's eyes. So you need to stick, especially this early in your book. You still haven't gotten us hooked on your, if your main character is going to be Big Mike, we need to get to know him and stay with him before you start letting another person take over point of view. And Bobby did that right away. We're seeing through his eyes. We're seeing things that Big Mike can't see. Big Mike doesn't know about the tattoos, and yet he's talking about them. So as far as staying with the main character, keep in mind that if he doesn't know it, if your active character doesn't know it, you can't see it. It can't happen, because that just means you're getting in the wrong point of view, or just stepping over into somebody else's head. So stay with Big Mike and let us hear from his point of view until we can have a chance to really get attached to him.
Absolutely. Definite point of view issues. Again, and if you're doing third person omniscient, 99% of the time it's not going to work.
Right. And it's in disfavor with publishing anyway, because they know it's not going to work.
Absolutely.
Okay, that is all the manuscripts we have for today. And this is on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it anytime.
All right. And
I would like to thank both of you for doing this for South Carolina Writers Workshop.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
And I'd like to say congratulations to the writers who came in and took the chance on letting us do our thing. And in spite of everything we've said, we just wanted to make sure you've got the best opportunity you have to have the best book possible. And that's why we might have been a little mean at times, but we don't mean it that way. We want you to have the best book you can. So we were as honest as we could be in our comments, and thank you for trusting us with it.
Exactly what she just said.
Thank you both.